John Dathan, the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Insight, is our keynote speaker today. He's going to be, with no slides, he's coming to us live in his amazing fuchsia, his signature, his trait, fuchsia jacket. He's going to be talking to us today about decoding digital, building game-changing partnerships for the future. Over to you, my friend. Over to you, John. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you, Nancy. So nice to be working with you again. I am going to actually pull up a couple of slides here just to keep me on track. So folks, I'm really happy to be here today. One of the things that I learned was that many of the folks that are joining us today are owners of their businesses. And I particularly want to applaud you for that. I'll take you back to a quote that I got from a partner conference many years ago. And it was a motivational speaker who was talking to the audience and was talking about the energy of the room and how many of the folks in that room were in fact owners or founders of their businesses. And the quote that has stayed with me for all this time is he says, there's a big difference between the people that sign the front of the check and the people that sign the back of the check. And I, for my entire career, have signed the back of a check. So I applaud those of you that have taken the risk and decided to form your own business. So congratulations on that. Now, I did want to just start, if we can go to the next slide, please. I also want to take just a moment. I don't want this to be about me at all, but if I was in your shoes, I would literally be sitting there and saying, okay, this is the poster for male, stale, and pale. Why is he talking to women in cloud? And I was absolutely thrilled when Chaitra reached out to me and asked me if I would do this, because I've been in the industry a long time and I focus a lot on relationships with other organizations. There's things that I thought I wanted to share with you. So a little bit about me. So I have been in the industry a little over 40 years. I'm a massive believer in lifelong learning, and you'll hear that through this. I've learned through materials, but I've also learned from taking some risks and making some mistakes. And really, we can win or we can learn. And so by making mistakes, I've learned along the way. I am very fortunate to be surrounded by some incredible women at work and at home. So I work at Insight and I lead their Canadian organization. We have a tremendous amount of women, and many of them are participating in the event today. So one of the things that I'm very passionate about is effective communication. And that will kind of weave itself through as I talk to you today, because I think effective communication is really the key to be able to build the kind of partnerships that you and your organizations need to have. And it's absolutely a privilege for me to be here today. So let's go to the next slide. So we're at a fascinating time with respect to technology. I spent the last 2 days, and I suspect some of you as well, with Microsoft at their Inspire conference. And things that are going on around the most overused letters in the industry, AI, and what people are doing to support these initiatives, it's incredible. Microsoft announced in the next 365 days, they're going to open 120 new data centers. So that's one every 3 days to support this massive explosion that's going on in the industry. And when I thought about talking to you today, I thought, well, one of the things that cloud and digitization has done is that they really are the great equalizers. Anyone can go out and find education, and we can be anywhere. And it's relatively inexpensive, and I don't want to make light of people having to invest, but if you compare it to the past where we would have to go to a college or a university to get education, you can get that education today for pennies on the dollar. We have access to tools like we've never had before. Things that we used to have to create, we can now do with a click of a mouse. So we're that much more efficient. And there's really no limits to what we can accomplish when we set our minds to it. And the amazing part about everything that's going on around digitization, it's the opportunities are boundless. And so all of that is going on all at once. And it really means that, we all have opportunity to be able to go and chase these opportunities. Next slide. But the one thing I want everybody to kind of be aware of, digitization, digital transformation, it is a game changer. There's no doubt that it's changing, but it's still the same game. Relationships matter, values matter, trust matters. All of these things have to be there. It's not all digital communication. We need to build relationships. We need to offer value to those relationships. And quite frankly, if we don't have trust, there's no such thing as a relationship, and whether that's in your personal life or your professional life. Next slide. So if everything has been equalized, it actually creates a new challenge for us. And that is, how do you differentiate yourself among the others? How do you stand out in this world? And really, as you're preparing for, I want to go after these new relationships because they're going to help me with my business, you really need to be specific about whom do you want to communicate with? And what value are you going to bring to those communications? And then specifically, how do you communicate that value? So think about those three questions as you're starting to build out how it is you're going to pursue these B2B partnerships that you're going to need for your business. We'll look at each one of these a little bit. Next slide. So it's important to know your audience. Who are you going to communicate with? And what I encourage people to do is think about a day in the life of that contact, right? What are the things that they have to go through? And what are the challenges that they're facing? And all of those aspects of it, because that's how you can figure out what would be value to them. And it needs to be about them. I get quite frankly bombarded by things like LinkedIn, and people reach out, and many times I'll click accept, and within seconds I've got somebody emailing me requesting, telling me about what they do and they want my time. They're not effectively communicating about what it is about me. So as you're reaching out to people, you need to be thinking about what is it for them. They're the ones, to go back to my earlier expression, they sign the front of the check. In this relationship, you're asking for a relationship, you're going to be signing the back of it. You need to make sure that it's all about them. Next slide, please. So what value do you bring is really, to me, tremendously important. We have to add value to every single interaction. I have one-on-one meetings with lots of different folks, and I do some mentoring, and some people are incredibly well prepared and they come with an agenda and they're adding value so that it's a productive discussion. Others want it to be just really more of a connection and a catch up. There's not enough value in that, and people can't afford that time. The only way that I know to add value, it's really done with greater knowledge. You need to be a subject matter expert for the area that you're talking about and some of the adjacencies that are around that. In my experience, if you understand something complicated well enough to explain it to somebody who doesn't know anything about it, you truly are a subject matter expert. And I think that's an important thing to challenge ourselves with, is really, really understanding it, but then how would you explain it to your grandmother? The third bullet, though, is probably one of the hardest things. We have to figure out how to communicate some of that value literally within seconds. If you go back to thinking about the day in the life of that person that you're trying to communicate with, they're bombarded with inputs. Things are coming at them. And the natural thing to do when you're already busy and you don't know why something is happening, and you don't know whether it's of value to, it's to shut it down. So literally within the first few seconds, you have to show enough value that they go, okay, subconsciously, I'll give this another 30 seconds. I'll give this another minute. And as I mentioned, I wish I had a formula for you to say A plus B equals, how to demonstrate that value. But of all those things that bombard me, there's a few that work. And I end up saying, yes, I'm interested, or I go to a website or do things. But the vast majority, I tune them out. And so as you're thinking through how are you going to pursue these ever so important relationships, think about how in that very short period of time to generate enough interest so that they want to spend more time. Next slide. So I didn't want to make this negative, but I felt compelled to kind of share a few things, kind of do's and don'ts. And I apologize if the acronym BS offends anybody, but there's so much of it in our industry. You really, when I say you have to have knowledge, you have to have true knowledge, right? We all know when people really don't have the knowledge and they're just saying things to us, you will lose that connection almost immediately. We all have a challenge in this industry. We drown people in acronyms. At Microsoft the last couple of days, there was times I wasn't listening to the content because in my head, I was still 30 seconds behind trying to figure out what that acronym was that people use. You need to be, for that effective communication, you need to really call it out. You may say, 3 words and the acronym, and then you can use the acronym because you've explained it. But don't assume that everybody knows that. The next 2 points I think are really important, and I'll share a little bit of examples around them. One is, don't forget that this may be 100% of your business world, we'll call it. That doesn't mean it's 100% of the person that you're talking to. And an example, I was with a technology firm week before last, and they were saying that, John, we don't feel that insight sellers tell our story well enough. And I said to them, well, I don't think that's a fair ask. You, as an employee of that organization, it's 100% of your life. The people that you're asking to explain the story, it's 2, 3, 4, 5% of their life. It's an unfair ask to say, you, that this is 5% of your life, explain it as if it was 100% of your life. And the final one is, don't abuse access. When you gain access to somebody, access is a privilege. And if you abuse that privilege, you will lose it. And so when I joined Insight 5 years ago, and we do business with literally thousands of partners, many people from earlier in my career reached out, and it was wonderful to hear from people. But some people, because they had my cell phone, would abuse that privilege. They would text me far too often. They would text me telling me why Insight isn't doing the right thing because we're not doing business with them or whatever. And I literally shut down those relationships because they were abusing that privilege. So to end on a bit of a more of a positive note, we'll go to the next slide. So kind of, where do I suggest everybody goes from here? First and foremost, educate. You see the hashtag always be learning. I use that all the time. I just think it's so important to develop that expertise because, again, that's where the value is going to come from. When you can share something with somebody to accelerate their knowledge, they're going to be more interested in having that relationship with you. You then need to connect your value to what is needed. Right? If building the world's, a better mousetrap, if somebody doesn't have a mouse problem, it's irrelevant. It's never going to fly. So you need to make sure your product or your service or your offering is connected to a value of what that person or organization needs. The third element is you need to craft your message. When Chai reached out to me about doing this, I thought for a few days. And then I sat down for a couple hours on a quiet morning, and I started to really build out what does the soundboard look like. And I had this thought around that equalization and what does that mean? And I literally started to expand it out so I could build what is the message going to be, because I want this to be valuable to you. And I wanted to make sure that this is important. So I built out that message. You then need to validate that message. And so I reached out to a number of women within Insight. I've talked about it at home. I reached out to a couple other folks and said, here's what I'm thinking. Would this message be of value to you if you were in the audience for this event? So I really validated that message. The next thing you have to do with that message is you need to practice it. Practice, practice, practice. I spend a fair amount of time up on stage. I'm probably rehearsing 20 minutes minimum for every minute that I might be on stage. So kind of a 20-to-1 ratio. And part of that is because when you're communicating that message, you want to focus on the communication, not on remembering what's next. And so the only way that I know how to do that is to practice. And then finally, as you're connecting with people, you need to listen to get their feedback. You need to adjust and you need to hone your message. So this is a bit of a circle around, once we've, between listen, craft, validate, practice, listen, craft, validate, practice. These are all of the things that are going to make you an incredibly effective communicator, demonstrating the value that you add, which is why people and organizations are going to want to have a business relationship with you. So with that, we can go to the last slide. I'm so appreciative to have been here today. I hope this talk track has been informative for you and gives you some things to think about. And I truly hope you have an incredible experience today. So thank you, and I'll pass it back to Nancy.
You are so great.